So I call to order the Gladstone City Council work session for July 28th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. Per the Governor's Executive Order 20-16 regarding compliance with Oregon's public meeting laws, the City of Gladstone is abiding by social distancing requirements during the coronavirus pandemic. The work session will be conducted virtually using the Zoom platform. The Zoom access instructions can be found on the meeting agenda. Members of the City Council, staff, and the public all have access to this call. This meeting is being held as a listening session only, and all those wishing to speak needed to have contacted Tammy Bannock by noon today. Any questions from council will be submitted to staff after the meeting and will be answered and included as part of the meeting records for public access. The chat function for this meeting will be closed. In the past, we've enabled this for people to ask questions. However, I don't think people understand that the entire chat thread is part of the permanent public record, and it is not a social media platform. Tonight, we are here for only one item, to provide a platform for people to share their stories. Because this is a listening session instead of a regular council meeting, it will be fairly informal. We will not have business from the audience, but will instead hear the stories of our citizens. For anyone that is online to speak, but hadn't notified staff by noon today, I'm sorry for the confusion, but the process was clear on our agenda. If you're hoping to speak on another subject, our first meeting of the month is where business from the audience is a permanent fixture. For those that are participating, thank you very much for being here. I would greatly appreciate everyone's help in keeping this session productive and positive, and most importantly, to the point. Thank you. Now, with the formalities done, good evening, everybody. In the wake of recent national, regional, and local controversy regarding the current situation of racial equity and social justice, the City of Gladstone is committed to being a safe, caring, and respectful community where discrimination and hate in any form is not tolerated. Tonight, we will engage our community members in a process of listening to recognize the pain that a family or individual may be experiencing because of racism. And I want to thank those courageous individuals who are here to tell us their stories so that we may better understand the way policies historically and currently impact each racial and ethnic group. The listening session will provide all of us an opportunity to have an open and honest understanding of these experiences and issues, and we thank all of you for your participation. The city has asked John Morgan, a consultant in community and organizational development, to facilitate this respectful process of recognition and affirmation of people and their experiences. Now I'll hand it over to John, and he's going to lay out the format for tonight.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, very much. I am incredibly appreciative of this opportunity to work with Gladstone, a community with which I've done work before and have a great regard for, on a matter that's very near and dear to my heart. I am a city manager, community development director, planning director, kind of a local government geek who loves working with Oregon's smaller communities. And I work all over the state with a broad variety of populations doing that. And I teach leadership in the public interest a lot. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is a fundamental part of the work that I try to engage communities in. And that's why we're here tonight. As the mayor said, we want to hear stories. We want to hear your experiences, what has happened that's good, bad, what would have you observed, and even and then your feelings about this and your ideas. She said it's a listening session. There'll be no questions asked tonight, but as a result of tonight, the council will meet, review everything that was heard, and move to a future work session where they will see, are there any agenda items, are there any action items, any policies or programs that might be appropriate for the city to take on in response to what they hear tonight. So you'll have more opportunity in the future to make input as this goes, but tonight we're laying a foundation, hopefully a strong foundation from a lot of people in the community. I'm pretty tickled right now to see, oh my gosh, we're up to 50 participants now, and that's terrific. So let's get started. Again, we're going to try to hold this to 5 minutes for each person. I'm going to call your name. But first, I do want to point out that we do have the entire city council here, and then along with Jackie Betts, the city administrator. But what's also great is we have the police chief with us and representatives of the school district, including the superintendent and the school board chair, and then also a representative of the religious community in John Roberts or New Life Church. This can't just be a city conversation, it's a community conversation. And so it's really great that we have all these folks participating and listening intently and with great interest in what you have to say tonight. So with that, let's go. We'll start from the beginning. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to call your name, and when I do, your mic will be unmuted for you. And we're going to try to keep this to 5 minutes each because we've got a lot of speakers. At the end of the speaker time, we'll consider whether we want to hear from others, but I'll put that question to the council when the time comes. I'd like you very much to introduce yourself, your relationship in Gladstone, how long you've been here, what you do in the community, any of those really quick things that you can say before you share your story with us. So with that, let's get started with number one on this, which is Kyle Donovan. Kyle.
Hello, I unmuted myself. Is that okay?
Yes.
I'm Kyle Donovan. My family has lived in Gladstone for 5 years. Thank you for taking this necessary first step in addressing racial injustice in Gladstone through this listening session. I'll keep this brief because this session is to listen to our Black and people of color community members. My hope is that this listening session isn't just a check the box moment for our city, but an opportunity to rise to the occasion to listen, believe, and reflect on racial injustices that have undeniably occurred in our schools and on our streets. Once you can hear these stories in your heart, only then will we be able to move forward as a community. As white people, understanding systemic oppression of marginalized communities takes work, and this type of work doesn't come from checking a box, taking a class, or holding a meeting. It comes from an authentic engagement with those who have had these experiences and letting them guide us on how to be better. I hope that by taking a hard look at our own individual and collective role in racial injustices, we will live up to the authentic and community spirit that we mention in our town's rebrand. As a white woman, I will continue to involve myself on a civic and educational level to ensure that our Black and people of color community not only have a seat at the table, but also have a voice in the decision-making that occurs on all levels. I expect to see diversity, equity, and inclusion as an agenda item in each of our council meetings moving forward, and that will appoint a Black and/or person of color with expertise in facilitating these actionable conversations. Gladstone's children and community deserve this platform to feel safe and welcomed in this town. Thank you.
Sean, you need to unmute your mic.
I'm sorry, I thought I was. Okay, obviously a prepared statement. It'd be very helpful if you could forward that for the record, if you don't mind, to Tammy at City Hall. And that would be very helpful because your eloquent words are probably going to be best absorbed if people can read them again. With that, let's turn to Kale Fajardo, which is probably not right, but
it's okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kale B. Fajardo. I'm trans-identified. My pronouns are he, him, his. I also have something that's somewhat prepared on my phone just to stay organized. So I am part of the GHS class of 1986. My Filipinx immigrant parents bought a house in Oak Ridge in 1977. My dad still lives there, and he's been paying his property taxes in Gladstone for the last 43 years. I've been returning to Gladstone since I graduated from high school, and I have a few classmates, sorry, and a dog, who have kids attending Gladstone schools. I'm here because it's a historical time in the US in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, which emerged in large part because of police violence against Black people in all parts of the US and the major disparities between white Americans and Black folks. BLM can also be seen as an extension of the 1960s civil rights movement, which was a multiracial social movement that protested systemic racism and Jim Crow laws that were a remnant and legacy of slavery in many regions of the US, not just the South. Since I'm currently staying with my dad, as you can see, I'm in the basement surrounded by a gazillion family photos to share my perspective as an educator and activist. So after I left Gladstone, I studied at Cornell and I finished my doctorate at UC Santa Cruz. I'm now an associate professor of American Studies and Asian American Studies at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. And I live actually a mile or so away from where George Floyd was murdered. Our department is a top 5 ranked department in the US, and we compete with the likes of Harvard and Yale, but with lesser resources. Minnesota's brand of American Studies stresses critical ethnic studies and Native studies. I think a positive and productive step towards racial justice and equity in Gladstone is improving education for kids of color. Teaching ethnic studies curriculum is one important way to do this. So if you aren't aware, it's a field that developed in approximately 1968 due to anti-war sentiments, and also because of Black Power and that particular social movement. There were student strikes where students at San Francisco State demanded a curriculum that served them better. It was multiracial. There were students of color, but also white allies. Fast forward now, and you will find that it's not just a radical Bay Area thing. U of O and OSU now have PhD programs in ethnic studies. Since currently Oregon is the only state with an ethnic studies requirement for K through 12, I thought it would be a good idea to advocate for the Gladstone School District to develop and implement ethnic studies curriculum for its K through 12 students. Kids of color in Gladstone and many of their parents may not feel comfortable advocating for an ethnic studies curriculum precisely because Gladstone is about 90% white. I'm in a different position as a professor and researcher, and it's been my job for the last 15 years at Minnesota to advocate for students of color and other marginalized students. To do this, I want to advocate for curriculum that represents diverse histories and communities, including histories of racial oppression inside the US as well as outside of the US. I'm not sure where the district is at with planning and implementation, but I want to stress how important it is to get that curriculum running. Ethnic studies curriculum generally includes Native studies, Black studies, Chicanx and Latinx studies, Arab studies, Pacific Islander studies, Asian American studies, and critical refugee studies, among some others that I may not have listed. I could talk more about the benefits of it, but one thing I will say as an educator is that I've seen that kind of curriculum help students of color, but also helps my white students to understand and whiteness is also a topic in ethnic studies and how whiteness works. I think that Gladstone has the opportunity to get ahead of the curve and be a leader in how ethnic studies in K through 12 is taught in Oregon. I'm super grateful for my education in Gladstone, and I would like to pay it back by advocating for curricular changes that can truly engage and inspire both students of color and white students. And although Gladstone is still very homogeneous, you still have the responsibility to make sure all kids are being served. So I offer my services and would like to work on the ethnic studies curriculum if the district needs help. Thank you, and go Glads.
Here, okay, there we are. Great, thank you. Let's move to Jack Stone, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. My name is Jack Stone. I'm a retired educator and have lived in Gladstone for 20 years. I'm here tonight in 2 capacities. First, as a concerned Gladstone citizen, and second, as a member of the administrative body of the Baha'i faith community. I want to thank the Gladstone City Council for providing this safe space for community members to address this most challenging issue of racism. As a privileged white male, I have not experienced the kind of bias and prejudice personally that people of color deal with every day. However, when my daughter married a black man 26 years ago, I had the unfortunate experience of witnessing firsthand how this happens. They had come to visit us in another community where we were living at the time. Her husband and I had gone out to run errands, and in that short time, he experienced 2 instances of not so subtle racism. I was so shocked that something like this would take place, I couldn't respond and didn't have the presence of mind to call it out. I was angry, not only toward the person who perpetrated the act, but at myself for not having the courage to call it out. Since that experience, I've tried to educate myself to be more observant and be prepared to call it out when I see it happen. My own history of shortcomings in this area have been made very clear to me, and I don't want to repeat them. I'm also here tonight as a representative of the Baha'i community of Gladstone. The Spiritual Assembly, our administrative body, has asked me to let the people of Gladstone know that we are here to support efforts that work to eradicate racism in our community. To that end, we have created a safe space by having a bi-weekly dialogue on racism in Gladstone, using Zoom, and welcome your participation. If you're interested in participating in that bi-weekly Zoom, I can provide the email to you for that link. Lastly, the Baha'i community received a statement from its World Center about 6 days ago that I want to share with you, and then I'm going to pass it along. Racism is a profound deviation from the standard of true morality. It deprives a portion of humanity of the opportunity to cultivate and express the full range of their capability and to live a meaningful and flourishing life, while blighting the progress of the rest of humankind. It cannot be rooted out by contest and conflict. It must be supplanted by the establishment of just relationships among individuals, communities, and institutions of society that will uplift all and not designate anyone as other. The change required is not merely social and economic, but above all, moral and spiritual. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love the fact that we're hearing these stories that bring a lot of personal connections to these experiences. So let's keep that up. It's helpful for everyone. Let's turn to Sandy Dvorak.
Hi, I'm Sandy Dvorak. I was the children's librarian here in Gladstone for about 20 years and am retired now, but I miss all the kids and spending time with all the community. We've raised our children here. We've raised 4 kids here in Gladstone over the last 40 plus years. And this is my home. This is my home, and I want to be proud of it. And one of the ways that we can be proud of Gladstone is by helping to create a community where everyone is welcome, accepted, and embraced, and not be the kind of place where it's just us versus them. So there's a time for self-inventory, and also a time, I think, for the institutions to start looking at themselves and saying, what can we do to be more proactive? What will make people feel welcome and free here and accepted? And I think that if we are truly interested in being a fully integrated society here in Gladstone, that we realize that in order to have unity, first we must have justice. So I'm going to keep mine short so the people with stories will have plenty of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy, very much. Good thoughts, and I appreciate people being brief as they possibly can be so that we can hear from a lot of people tonight. But on the other hand, we don't want to shortchange anyone with their sincere stories and feelings and ideas. So please bring those forward. All right, next up is Summer Lamson.
Hi there. I also have a statement. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Summer Lamson and I'm an Oregon native, but recently purchased a home here in Gladstone with my husband just a few months ago. So as a new member of our community, I'm committed to listening and providing support to our marginalized community members in an effort to help Gladstone become a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. I also have a Black 11-year-old stepdaughter that currently lives in South Carolina. And in the future, when she comes to live with us and goes to school, I want her to know that she'll be in a community that will love and support her and make her feel like a welcomed member. So I appreciate us creating the space to have this conversation and expect to see more of these opportunities again in the future. I'd like to give the rest of my time to hear from more experienced Gladstone members of their stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My experience is if you press the space bar, it unmutes you, but that doesn't seem to be working. So I'm sorry about a slight lag on my part. Simona, your turn.
Hello, I'd like to apologize in advance. I'm having a bit of an issue with my laptop. That's why you don't see me. And sometimes it completely interrupts. But while I have the chance, I'd like to say that I lived in Gladstone for more than 10 years, minding my own business, working hard to provide for my mom, who is ill and lives with me, paying taxes, going to church. Then I woke up one morning to the picture of a knee on George Floyd's neck. It was a shock that reverberated throughout my whole body. How can this be? I left a communist country where I was oppressed by my own people to come to America in pursuit of freedom and justice for all. What happened, I ask you? Where is the justice for all? Have we forgotten the history? And how we come to be here? We don't have to dig deep in history to find out. Where are the Native Americans? Oh, that's right, they're what is left of them on reservations. Why do we even call it a reservation? Where's the justice for the natives? Can you hear the drums? Then hard work and manual labor had to be done, and here comes the Black folk brought against their will to work for the white man. We don't even have to dig deep, just 60 years back to the 60s when they had enough, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led the civil rights movement. Can you hear the chains? We want a better history. You have the opportunity to make it happen, to be the change. I'll bring it close to home. We want to be proud to live in Gladstone, but are we addressing the racism that is going on right under our nose? My friend who is Black chose to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation, told me her children were treated differently in school and how her daughter's boyfriend was slammed to the ground by the police in front of her house for no apparent reason. Why is this happening, I ask you? Yes, I want to be proud of the city I live in, where everyone is treated the same. I appeal to your humanity and ask that you reflect and take action to ensure our friends and neighbors in our Gladstone community will not be mistreated anymore because of how they look or how they are different. Change comes by listening. I ask that you honor your position and the community who elected you by bringing forth a change that addresses equality and reforms that benefit everyone. Can you hear the drums? Can you hear the chains? Can you hear the voices crying out for justice? Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Really appreciate those comments. I really do. Let's turn to Mary Moffett Brown.
Do I unmute? Okay, hi. First of all, I want to thank the Gladstone City Council for making this meeting happen. I know it wasn't probably on the horizon initially, but I'm really glad that we've all been able to gather together and share our circumstances. So as for myself, I'm your basic white woman. I spent 37-year career in the Indian Health Service providing health care to Native Americans. My late husband was a Black man from inner city Baltimore. We were married for 27 years. I have 3 sons, a daughter-in-law, and 2 grandchildren who are Black. And like anyone else, they made the world to me. The world is getting a lot smaller. I've heard some of the stories from young people who have been accosted or abused in the school facilities, school halls, or the streets by other classmates. And one of the things that I really would love to point out is that allowing these situations to continue is no service to those white students either. The world is small and getting smaller, and they are going to be dealing with a very diverse world in their future. And if they don't understand some of the concepts of equity and justice and living a prejudice-free life, they're going to be at a disadvantage in their future, just almost as much as the people of color have been so far. The Black Lives Matter opportunity is an opportunity nationally to be on the right side of history. So many of these situations that Black people and people of color have had to deal with for generation upon generation upon a generation are finally now starting to be understood by the rest of society. My late husband used to say that civil rights legislation changed the law, but it didn't change people's hearts. And I believe that watching George Floyd die in front of us on television in our living rooms changed a lot of hearts. And we are in a country now where we are going through tremendous changes. It's nice to avoid controversy for a lot of people. It's really a comfy place to be, to not have our opinions challenged. But I think it's going to take opening our hearts and our minds to bring justice to everybody. We don't have to agree with everything we hear here, but the justice we achieve will depend on the willingness of everyone to take 1 or 2 steps beyond our comfort zones and put ourselves out there just a little bit and try to meet other people halfway. I'd like to share a quote from Manoj Arora, who is an engineer and an economist, about comfort zone. It says, coming out of your comfort zone is tough in the beginning, chaotic in the middle, and awesome in the end, because in the end, it shows you a whole new world. I'm sorry? Okay. So that's basically what I wanted to share. I'm also a member of the twice weekly Gladstone Conversation on Racism Zoom group. I'm also a member of the local Baha'i Assembly, and we are determined to make justice alive and well here in Gladstone. Thank you.
Thank you. Would your daughter-in-law like to say a few minutes or say a few words?
I'm on the queue. I'm coming later.
Very good. All right. Let's turn to Tracy Hill.
Hello. I have something prepared I'm going to read. Hello, my name is Tracy Hill. I was raised in Gladstone. I'm here tonight with my smart, talented, beautiful daughter who is Black to share our Gladstone experience. Sierra started her junior year at Gladstone High School in the fall of 2016. We were so hopeful of Gladstone after she dealt with so many different racial issues at Canby High School. Gladstone High was so much more diverse as far as she could see. She was called the N-word in the first week of school. During her attendance at Gladstone High School, Sierra endured what seemed like very interesting situations that seemed very racist to me. Number one, when money went missing from a locker, a white student, the white PE teacher that a white student told the white PE teacher that it must have been Sierra and another student of color. Even with other students present, these two Black girls were singled out and scrutinized. Number two, Sierra faced bullying and discrimination from teachers, one in particular who knew and understood the IEP in place, but did not adhere to it or provide her appropriate accommodations. Others in the class were given similar accommodations. Number three, there was a secret meeting held by the superintendent for Brown and Black students to ask their opinion on the current curriculum and whether they should change it. Although this seems proactive and helpful, parents were not contacted. This is another example of the system asking the very people it oppresses to carry the burden of enacting meaningful change. In the community, she has experienced the following. Number one, Sierra has on multiple occasions experienced being almost purposely run over while walking across the street in crosswalks within the city. Number two, Sierra has been watched and followed around the store multiple times in Walgreens and at both Oak Grove and Clackamas Fred Meyer for absolutely no reason. Number three, she has to endure racial slurs by people driving by when she's merely walking down the street with her friends who are white. Number four, there was a Snapchat going around about another student at Gladstone, pictured with a black charcoal face mask. The caption read, "I am an N-word," but she used the actual racial slur, which I refused to do. Nothing was done about it. Why? Because she was a star soccer player. I attended Gladstone from 1984 to 1988, and they have always put sports and their star athletes above the law. I see things haven't changed a bit. Here are some examples of our very own neighborhood. Number one, we live in the River Greens Apartments complex, which has a pool. The manager of the complex has called the police on my daughter and her friends while using their own pool that they pay for. I don't have to tell you how these situations can end. Number two, a couple of weeks ago, there was an incident in the parking lot between a Black man and a white woman where the white woman threatened to call the cops. My daughter was taking the garbage out and had to witness this. I'm just glad she called me out there when she did. I somewhat de-escalated it by interrupting to ask what was going on. One woman even had her pit bull out there and was easing it toward the man. All of this happened within minutes. If the cops had been called, it likely would have made everything worse. I screamed, "Don't yell, don't call the cops on Black people," but was called a bitch before re-entering my apartment. Racism exists in the city, our city. I see it in my neighborhood, the school, and on the streets. I'm here tonight because I truly believe Gladstone can become much more inclusive and accepting of all people. Thank you for your time.
I think I can speak for all of us in my appreciation and admiration for your courage. Thank you very much for sharing that and working through it so we could hear your story. That was wonderful. Let's turn to Martine.
Okay.
It's your
Thank
turn
you.
finally.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and City Councilors, for tonight's listening session, and thank you to our facilitator. My name is Martine Koblenz, and we have been living in Gladstone for the last almost 4 years. And I am actually going to start tomorrow in my new role as the Equity and Inclusion Officer for Clackamas County. And so the work that I do is very much obviously focused in this work, and it's not by accident. It's because of my lived experiences and the experiences of my husband and my siblings and my mom and my children, which is what brings me here tonight. So before, I do have something that I have written, but I do want to share just a little bit from my heart about why this matters to me, why it's so important, and why I hope that tonight's meeting is just the beginning of something great and wonderful in our community. You know, so I was born in Haiti. My mom is Haitian, my dad's Jewish American. I'm biracial, my husband's biracial. My daughter in first grade was already excluded and told point blank by other children in the first grade that she couldn't play with the group of girls because she had darker skin. My husband constantly gets followed around in the stores, the different Fred Meyers that Tracy just named, basically any store that's to be expected. Even walking in our own neighborhood, which we love our neighborhood and we feel so happy and blessed to be here. But even walking in our own neighborhood, my husband has been followed by somebody in a pickup. So we've only been here for a short time, but I just wanted to share what our experiences have been in this short time. And I haven't shared all of them, but I wanted to give a little flavor about why this matters to me and why it's important to me personally, and that I also do this work professionally. So we are here, this is an opportunity, this listening session is to address the health and well-being of our entire community. I say our health and well-being because racism is a disease that has been impacting us for so long. We have to acknowledge our very painful history so we can better understand how we are still living in a painful present. This listening session is the acknowledgement and the very beginning of this process. So I'm coming from a hopeful place. In addition to recognizing our history, we also acknowledge the problem by admitting when we as individuals, we as a culture, we as a society are being racist. As Ibram Kendi says, we're all impacted by racism in our society. It's like the rain falling on our heads. We're all impacted by it, but most of us don't even know that we are wet. Being racist does not mean you are an extreme person. Being racist is not about whether you're a kind person. It is deeper than that. It is about ideas, narratives, policies, and ways that lead to racial inequities. I know Gladstone city officials want our city to be a place that gives a sense of belonging, safety, and opportunity for residents. And yet we are falling short from these ideals, as we are hearing from the accounts of others tonight. To live up to our ideals, we have to get rid of the idea that anyone is less than, below, inferior. We must commit to changes that are meaningful and sustainable. So I'm going to end with a call to our mayor and to our city councilors. I call upon you to take in what you have been hearing from your residents and begin a plan of action. First, continue engagement with communities of color to understand the pain and the experiences in this city. Take an internal look at the city structures, policies, and procedures that perpetuate narratives that are unwelcoming, othering, and exclusive, and change them. 3, continue to work with the school board and collaborate on ways to make our schools a place that is welcoming and free from discrimination. 4, create a committee comprised of community leaders who can advise you in the above work and hold you accountable to move this work forward. Committee leaders who have lived experience as people of color or belonging to other marginalized groups. And 5, hire an equity manager who can lead this work in our city. The work of anti-racism is the work of becoming a better human to other humans. That's a quote from Austin Channing Brown. So let's work on making Gladstone a better city for all of our city residents. Thank you.
You know, I thought your name sounded familiar, and now I recognize, because I knew you had taken that position, following in the footsteps of Emmett Wheatball, a man I have spent many, many hours with and have learned so much from him. So congratulations on following that legacy and the county's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. It's wonderful. Let's turn to Leslie Meyer, please.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Leslie Myers, and I moved to Gladstone in 1978. And other than getting married and moving to another community for a few years, we're back. We've been back here for 20 years. And I wanted to talk about a couple things. The first one comes from some previous talks we've had in this format, in this group. I want to start with a quote from this book, White Fragility, which I highly recommend to everyone. I'm learning a lot of history. I'm learning a lot about myself and racism. The full title by Robin DiAngelo is White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. And this quote is on page 17 of that book. It's a quote of Lillian Smith from 1949. These ceremonies in honor of white supremacy performed from babyhood slip from the conscious mind down deep into muscles and become difficult to tear out. I am newly retired as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and as a mental health professional, we know that trauma affects the body, just exactly like in this quote. This is before even the text of the book, and it already bought me into the book because it's so true. We know that trauma affects the body deeply. It affects the central nervous system. It affects the periphery, our arms, our legs, our muscles. It affects our cells. And fortunately, there's some newer therapies that are helping people to deal with and change the body. You can't treat trauma without also treating the body. But it can even change our genetic signaling. And think about what that does, both on an individual level and an intergenerational level, with trauma going from one generation to the next, and think about what that does to our cells, to our bodies, to our hearts.
We'll get behind them.
When people go through trauma, we know that the frontal lobes turn off, and that's for our protection. Blood flow increases to the extremities and helps us with people know about the fight-flight response. There's actually 3 responses that are all life-saving. So it's the fight, flight, or freeze response, all of which are life-saving in the appropriate moment. Our prefrontal cortex is where our executive functioning happens. That's how we can take in information. It's how we can learn. It's how we make decisions. That's offline during trauma. That's part of the reason we have trouble recalling specific parts of trauma, because our frontal lobes are off because we're in danger. So again, think about that from one generation to the next. At the same time our prefrontal cortex is offline, our amygdala is firing. And the amygdala is like the fire alarm in the brain. It tells us that we're in danger. And over time, with repeated trauma, the amygdala fires more and more easily. And again, that's protective. It's how our bodies are made. It's to warn us of danger. And I want to relate all this to the problem of the illness we've been talking about, which is racism. And when you think about our history, most people know about slavery, about oppression, about things that quote unquote used to be. A lot of people deny that racism exists. There's a lot of myths like, well, we've had a Black president, so that's all behind us. People don't know about the unconscious brain and the environment we live in. What is that story about a fish in the water not being aware of its surroundings? What? Well, anyway, people have a hard time understanding what we talk about with institutional racism, with unconscious racism. And again, this book has been very helpful for me, The White Fragility, and I so strongly recommend that people read this. She talks about why it's hard for us as white allies in this movement or as non-allies. Because when people, it's hard to face the fact that we were raised in a racist society and we become defensive. We also don't want to be seen as bad. So people can just really be in denial about the fact of racism. And we need lots of education, including in the school system. But one of the reasons I'm so appreciative of the City Council is that you have been willing to hire this consultant to lead our discussion tonight, that you are open to hearing about racism right here in our community. And I also want to talk more personally about the heart, about feelings of racism. Just hearing these stories is very moving. It's very sad, but I also have a great deal of hope for our future. I have an interracial family. I know what it's like to go with my granddaughter. Before COVID, every year we would go out to lunch and go shopping. And I know what it's like to see her, see people's reactions to her, people's reactions to us together, being tracked, being followed, or being really helped, like they won't leave us. That kind of racism, as well as not understanding what societal racism is, how it's seeped, like Martine was saying, like the rain. I mean, how many of us really notice the rain in Oregon, right? It's here, it's around us. It can be unconscious. And It's very painful. I want to, oh, where is it? I want to end with another quote. Excuse me here. Okay, and this is about words, how words can affect us. And again, I'm also a member of the Spiritual Assembly of Gladstone for the Baha'is. And this is what words do to us. For the tongue is a smoldering fire, and excess of speech a deadly poison. Material fire consumeth the body, whereas the fire of the tongue devoureth both heart and soul. The former lasteth but for a time, whilst the effects of the latter endureth a century. So I think of this when I hear about words and the pain that words can cause and how words can heal. So thank you.
Thank you very much, very much. Let's turn to Anessa Hartman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for having this session. I have also written a statement. My name is Anessa Hartman. My pronouns are she, her. I want to first begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Molalla, Kalapuya, and Clackamas natives. It is important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us all to reside on this land, and for you to seek and understand your place within that history and how you intend on owning that to change the future. I am a First Nations woman. My people are from the Six Nation of Iroquois, and I am a Cayuga native. My family and I moved here about 6 years ago from Southern California. And for the first time in my life, I was told that I was lucky because I am able to pass as white. I am bringing this up because as early as 7, I can remember the first time a teacher looked at me, surprised, and said how well I spoke English. At 10, kids were constantly asking me why my skin wasn't red and would only say hi to me by saying, how. At 13, when I challenged my history teacher to elaborate on what happened to the natives when you know who sailed the ocean blue, I was removed from the class since it was sensitive material for me. At 15, we were told by our basketball coach that the ethnic girls were to escort their white friends to the bathroom when we were playing in what he deemed the ghetto. When I graduated high school, I was met with the constant questions of, did you get your college paid for? Are you going to work for your casino? Additionally, I witnessed my friends of color being called names like Burrito Boy, Oreo Twinkie, Dothead, being asked, what are you? You're so interesting looking. My Asian friends constantly having to fend off the requests for tutoring. You might be asking yourself why I am telling you about experiences that did not happen in Gladstone. It is because I want you to know that this is by no means a new current racial issue. This is an issue that has gone on forever. Racism and prejudice behavior begins at a very young age, and it is taught. The subtle and insidious actions that happen during childhood is why I am speaking today. Because now, we as a community have the opportunity to change these behaviors for the next generation, so that in 20 years, someone like Sierra or Zora don't have to relive even the tiniest of traumas to still try and convince people that systematic racism is real. I have to ask myself why we as a city are just now talking about racial equity and social justice. Based on the stories I have heard over the past 2 months, this has been an issue for a very long time. To me, every single person has the ability to be racist and prejudiced. Thus, everyone has an opportunity to grow and relearn. And if you do not accept that, if you think you have no need for this kind of growth or that this is a waste of your time, then I am here to tell you that you do indeed this basis of white supremacy. because that would mean to me that you do not feel and are not willing to accept the pain and suffering of the marginalized community and marginalized people in this community. You need to know, as people of color, we begin our discussions on racism with our children early in their lives. Imagine the power if all families had the same conversations with their children as early as we do, to teach them about what real equality looks like and to stand up for those who are less privileged. Now, I know that word privilege tends to trigger an emotion in some, so I am going to give you examples of what I believe are my privileges. I have the privilege over my Black friend because I get to pass as being white. I can literally choose to hide my ethnic identity should I ever need to. I have the privilege over my Salvadorian friend to receive better care and pain medications at the hospital while giving birth because I am viewed as white. I have the privilege of receiving a callback after submitting my resume with the same qualifications and the same experiences over my Muslim friend because my name reads as white. These are just some of my privileges. So if I, as someone who identifies as a person of color, can admit that they have some privileges over others, so should you. When you hear someone say white privilege, know that it means that while your life may have had its challenges, your skin color was never one of the things that attributed to those challenges. So I empower you to end the oppressive legacies of the past and change the future for all of our children. Give our little ones the diverse representation they deserve so that they too can see someone that looks like them be the hero of the story, be an inventor who changed the world, be a politician who paved the way, but also so that each and every other child can understand that other kinds of children can also be teachers and scientists and space explorers. And I'm not requesting that this happen in the shortest month of the year or right before Thanksgiving. I am talking about every single day embracing and honoring every ethnicity, their history, their culture, and they as a human being, because our children should be proud of who they are and they should never be afraid to embrace that. I will use this newfound privilege of mine to uplift and create an environment where people feel safe and welcome. And I really hope you truly take this to heart, what the community is saying, and make the necessary systematic changes that are needed to create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, where are we? Monica. Monica. Monica, are you here? What are we?
Can you hear me?
There we are. There we are. Good. Thank you.
My computer died.
Monica, we can come back to you if you want.
I apologize. I'm going to have to do this off of the cuff because my computer just died. So my name is Monica Darrens. I had written up something so I can forward it later on when my computer comes back. But what I wanted to say was my name is Monica Darrens again, and I lived in the city of Gladstone for roughly 15 years. I moved there in 1997-ish and left around 2010. But my family has had a home in Gladstone for the past 40 years that they've rented out. And in fact, my eldest daughter, Shaylee, still resides in Gladstone to this day. I'm speaking on behalf of my daughters, Shaylee and Karina. Shaylee, like I said, she's my eldest. She's 26. She's of mixed race. She's half Black, half white. My daughter, Karina Herrera, is half Mexican, half white. And yes, they are both biologically mine. The reason I wanted to speak tonight was to give some examples of situations that I've experienced. I apologize for not being able to speak eloquently as my notes have disappeared. But what I can speak to is throughout the Portland metropolitan area, not only in the Gladstone area, but throughout my life, I've experienced situations as in where my daughters father and I were boarding a TriMet bus in the Milwaukee Transit Center, he was punched in the face by a man and called the N-word and was pulled off of the bus and beaten. Luckily, there were other passengers who were able to stop the incident. On another occasion, we were told in a restaurant that the food choices that we desire were not available, even though we hadn't been offered a menu. Being white mostly, but also a proud member of the Spokane Indian tribe, I can say that I was very naive and will admit today that I am still naive to some of the subtle racism and prejudice. And what I can say also is that racism often is subtle. It isn't in your face. There are nuances that occur every day, like being followed throughout a store, being overly helped, are situations that we face on a day-to-day basis. I can speak for my daughter, Shaylee. She was shy and didn't want to speak on camera, but I talked to her about her years in Gladstone as both my daughters attended from kindergarten through high school. I asked her, what were there any blatant situations that you felt where you were marginalized? And she said there wasn't anything that was very obvious, as much as she didn't receive the same help she felt from school counselors or school officials to gain entrance to college. She had to do it all on her own. She also spoke to the lack of cultural awareness courses that were offered, and also that Black athletes were put on a pedestal where Black women, as she is, were marginalized, were made to feel lesser than. And on several occasions, white students, male students, would tell my daughter that they would never date a Black woman because they're not as pretty as white women, or they're too loud, and they just didn't want to deal with it. On other occasions, I was pulled over while driving in Gladstone with my daughter's father, and the excuse given by the police was that I had a headlight or taillight out. I was asked where I was going, who I was with, if I was safe, what we were doing. However, this was false because I had my vehicle checked several times as I was pulled over several times and given the same excuses that none of my lights were inoperable. I'm going to ask my daughter, Karina Herrera, to speak as well, as she was a student also of Gladstone schools from kindergarten throughout high school, and she's going to give some of her stories as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karina Herrera. I just graduated from Gladstone about I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, 2018. I'm actually going to speak about my own experiences and some of my friends who couldn't be here and couldn't talk for themselves. I remember in elementary school, I had to go into a class with other Latino students. I didn't really know what it was, so I never told my mom about it because I assumed that I just needed the class. But she later on figured out, because I had mentioned it to her, and I actually found out later on when I was about, I think in high school already, that they were ESL classes, and they hadn't even informed my parents that I was in them. And I don't speak Spanish. Also, I think, I'm trying to think. Oh, and also in elementary school, one of my friends had mentioned to me that during a school field trip, when she wanted to have her mom volunteer as a chaperone, the teacher had assumed that her mom couldn't speak English and told her that her mom wasn't allowed to volunteer because she couldn't speak English. I know in middle school, one of my friends just mentioned to me that another student named had told her to cool her beans because she was Mexican, when in fact my friend is actually Native American. More incidents had happened with the same girl in high school, where she had told me and my group of friends she wishes she was brown because she wants to hang out with us. She had also told me and my group of friends that I was more Mexican than some of my other friends because I had a quince, which if some of you don't know is a cultural celebration that we do when a girl becomes a woman at the age of 15. I also recall when, and I think it was my sophomore year of high school, I had a week off of school to go to Mexico with my dad to visit some family in Mexico. And when I came back, I had asked my teacher, I had asked him some questions about the homework that I had missed, and he made a comment that the class should be easy for me, which is obvious that he was referring to the fact that I'm Mexican and I had just came back from visiting Mexico. Another incident had happened where it was my senior year and I had another Spanish class with, because I ended up not having anymore because for that reason. I had actually had, and he would get irritated with me, and one of the other students who was in the class with me, who was also Latino, he would get mad at us because we would try and help him out just by like correcting that he wasn't teaching some of the words right. There's not very many. Oh, I also do recall after I was already the year that I graduated, when had actually sent me the picture of, I remember I helped her share it around. I talked to my aunt who she was living with at the time about it, and we had tried to get it figured out with the school, and the school pretty much would blow it off. And her dad is actually one of the coaches. So from what I've heard from, because I was a cheerleader, and actually one of my fellow cheerleaders, her mom was actually a coach and her dad was a football coach. And from what I've heard is that if you are a coach at Gladstone, you actually sign a contract, I think it is, and you have to follow certain rules, and if your kid or you break the rules, like, you need to be kicked out, which actually got to start. She actually got to start in her games, and she actually continued in track, and her dad never received any type of punishment. And my point with bringing this up is I still believe that she does need to have some type of punishment, because I also helped spread awareness to, and which were the 3 boys that did not get to walk in graduation this year. And because they received punishment, I think that she still needs to be held accountable for the things that she did. I also think it's a little suspicious that are actually both mixed, is Guatemalan and Puerto Rican, I think it is, and is I think he's half Latino, but they are both mixed, and they actually received punishment right away, and still gets to play in her sports every year, her dad still gets to coach and everything, which I don't think is right at all.
The 5 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure the school board's interested in those stories. That's important. Let's turn to Zora, please.
Wait, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Just fine, thanks.
Okay. I just signed up today, so I hadn't had anything written. So I'm about to read a speech I made for a protest from a couple of days ago, and I'm sorry if you heard it again for some of you. My name is Dvorak, and I was born and raised in Ethiopia, which is in East Africa. I moved here in 2008. I was 8 years old. I hadn't seen a white person. I didn't even know white people existed actually until I was 6, and I saw a tourist for the first time in Ethiopia, and I was very confused, and I had to ask my mom. And I came here in 2018 with no English, to nobody to able to speak with, to everybody, no Ethiopians, nobody to relate to. And I'm about to read you some of my experiences. This is only starting from high school, so there's a bunch, way more stuff that's happened to me from first grade onwards, but here's a couple of the stuff. I transferred, okay, so I said my name is Dvorak, and I'm a former student of Gladstone High School. I graduated this year, and it's amazing. But I transferred there halfway through my freshman year of high school back in 2016. I had attended Oregon City High School for the first 6 months of my freshman year, but moved there after there was a bunch of scandals that had happened at Oregon City. My mom thought that the school, she was fed up with all the racist stuff that was happening at OC. So she thought Gladstone, with its smaller, tight-knit community, was more appealing, but we found out that we were both wrong. During my sophomore year of high school, I was bullied and targeted. I used to get my hair done into twists, and people used to call me shower rods all across the hallways because they thought my hair and my twists looked like curtain rods. People told me I should be on National Geographic whenever I wore my ethnic clothes or dashikis. I also had people that would jam up my lockers constantly, and I was changing lockers every 2 weeks. I would get a new locker. They would find my new locker and jam it. It would happen constantly. I even found the people one time jamming my lockers, and I was yelling at them. I would have to find my hydro, my jackets. They would be in the trash. I would have to go look for them. I would call my aunt crying every day after school. My sophomore year, I also took advanced American Lit, and I remember my teacher basically giving the class permission to say the N-word if they were comfortable because it was accurate to the time in history. The thing was, I wasn't comfortable with it. When you go to a predominantly a white school and you're the only student in that class, and a teacher who's white is also saying the N-word, everybody looks at you and turns around, and it's very uncomfortable. They would all look at me when she said nigger, right when it was on the book. I told the principal that I wasn't comfortable with it, and they told me they would take it out of the curriculum because I wasn't the only one that had complained to them. The next year, I received a text from a girl a year below me. It was my junior year, and she told me to meet her in the bathroom because she needed to talk to me. So I went there, and I found her in the bathroom stalls crying, she was bawling. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me literally an almost identical story to mine, because she was taking the same class, and the teacher said the same thing. If they felt comfortable, they could say the word. She was the only Black girl in the class, and everyone was looking at her just like it happened to me. So again, I went to the principal with her and told them how I had been that same girl crying the year before, and they told me that they would look at it, but that's exactly what they said to me the year before. Mind you, I already had a long history of going to the administrator, telling them something, and they would tell me they would fix it, and then they wouldn't fix it. Okay. I also got in trouble once for causing a disturbance to the class. It's the same class who's my cousin. I was in that class, and 2 students were taking turns drawing a picture of me with a gun to my head back and forth, adding more to the picture. So they threw it in the trash. I saw them throw it in the trash. I went up and went to the recycling, took the paper, and I saw it, and I saved it because I went to go show it to the principal. And all over it had the words libtard, liberal lover. And I started yelling at them, and my teacher told me to leave the classroom. And I told him what happened, but he was like, no, I don't have time for that. He wouldn't even let me listen. So I called my uncle, and we went to the school and had a whole meeting about it. I dropped that class, and since that day onward, do everything to be nice to me, to treat me like I'm fragile, because of he realized he was in the wrong. The summer right before my junior year, I had received a picture of this girl I'd gone to school with in a black face mask with the caption, I am a nigger across it. Immediately after that, I got this message at 1 in the morning.
I can't even explain. I wanted to throw up. I was just so upset. Like, I could not sleep that night. So I made a post literally during the night about how I felt. That post got shared over like 900 times, had 1 million comments, and people started talking about it. But I also did receive numerous messages and posts from different people defending this girl. Her name is the same girl that I'm talking about. Her own mother had reached out to me and demanded that I take the picture down because I was causing a lot of harm to her daughter. And what I was doing, I quote, was actually in fact a hate crime. She told me her daughter meant no harm and it was an inside joke with her friends. The school failed to hold her accountable, and they ended, like she said, she got suspended for less than half the season, was Tri-Valley Player of the Year. Right when I heard she was Tri-Valley Player of the Year, I went to the principal and I told them how it was unfair, and they told me they couldn't do nothing about it. And I told them that was a slap in the face after they had told me they would do any and everything and give her right repercussions when she got nothing. And to this day, she has nothing. They also tried to make a club meeting group where they tokenized and excluded the Black kids into a meeting monthly so they could have a safe place where they felt heard. They also would send out newsletters and to invite people, like parents with people of color, for meetings but we're not in the wrong and we don't need to have education. Why don't you try to talk to the white people in the school, the white people that go, like the students that go around calling us the N-word, think it's funny when we like tell them that that's not okay. Anyways, my junior year, I also had an incident where the school failed me. I was fed up with the school not addressing their racial issues, especially about the profuse use of the N-word, as I was saying. I went to the student she had been saying the N-word repeatedly, so I told the principal, it was a group of us Black kids that would all sit on the table. And one of my friends told me she'd been using the N-word again and again. I quickly became known around the school to call people out when they say it. So I told the principal, because they always tell me when you have find a problem instead of going to them. So I tried to do it the right way. And I told the principal to come here and I was like, this is what I mean by our school is racist. And I told her that this girl was saying an N-word. Later on, she told me that the way I was saying it, I came off aggressive and that it was hostile and everyone was yelling, but there was a reason. We were fed up with it. We were trying to have a conversation with you. So she walked away and she said, Zora, I don't have time for this. That was my last straw. So I threw my whole lunch away and I was like, okay, I'll find time. And I told the girl. So I went up to her. The principal, mind you, also found the girl and was standing right by her table because she knew I was going to go to her because she heard me yelling, okay, I'll tell her. So I told her and I said, don't say the N-word. I don't know who gave you the right, but don't say it. At that point, her boyfriend is sitting right there. He's a white person. He starts calling me the N-word. He's like, oh, what? N-word, N-word, N-word. He kept saying it. All the Black people had followed me. That was it. They just jumped. Before I knew it, they'd ran up on them and it was just a big scene. After that big scene, then they started like, oh, wow, we have a big problem. Oh, wow, this, and calling us the troublemakers. But we've been trying to tell you have a problem in the school. But when we snap and break, that's when everyone wants to talk about it and have CCR classes and talk about it. I'm just over it. It's exhausting and tiresome to go to a school where there's less than literally 20 Black kids that make up the student body and we're constantly targeted. What's even worse is going to the school where I have no hope in the administration and the staff that they'll do anything because I've gone to them 1 million times and they still tell me that they're not going to do anything or that they will do something and nothing happens. I always been treated like I was the problem. Instead of finding the people jamming my lockers, I had to move lockers. Instead of the people drawing pictures about me with a gun to my face, I was the one to leave the classroom. Why are the BIPOC people being treated like they're the problem? Where's the ones having to go to classes and having a safe space? We should feel safe just going to a school. That's not fair. So I'm just over it. I finished my senior year this year, and 2 days before graduation, there had been an incident where there were 3 students, like Karina said, that couldn't walk. I called out a week before that because he was calling the riots and Black people retards. So I said, oh, you want to emulate us, but then we're retards when we're getting shot up. Next thing I know, once I called him out, I guess he'd said the N-word, and so he got called out for that, and it was just like a big thing. I had nothing to do with them not being able to walk, but because I'm the one to call people out, everyone assumed I had told the administrator and made them not walk. So they started writing, making posts and commenting hashtag fuck Zora, tried to find any and every reason against me to try and not let me walk and report at the school. Instead of being accountable for their actions, they turned around and blamed the Black kid for their racist actions. The same kid that also couldn't walk, he made a white power sign, and he got kicked, like a white power sign with a caption that said, welcome back to brotherhood, skinhead, with a teacher in it. The same kid that got kicked out of the University of Portland, he announced on his Instagram, and under his post, a mother of like a friend of his mom commented under it, where I work, she said she had to bite her tongue from saying anything, and that I was a troublemaker. But I didn't even know what did until afterwards. I don't understand why.
Timers went off.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in here because Leslie Myers got to go for a very long time, over her 5 minutes, and now she's cut off Karina Herrera and Zora. So I would like to let Zora finish.
Thank you. Can you guys still hear me? Okay. Thank you. I just have one last thing to say is I don't understand why people and adults keep repeatedly getting mad at the victims and keep victim blaming instead of questioning the oppressor and the students who are blatantly racist. I also find it interesting that the school decided to not let these three gentlemen walk because of the parents calling in and students were furious, but they didn't hold the same exact level of intolerance with the blackface incident, which to this day I'm still fed up about. I understand that the world is focused on social issues and addressing the racial injustice, but it should be like this all the time. They should be consistent in reprimanding students despite what's happening. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad we've heard from a couple of students this evening, people with recent experience in high school. We have one more signed up speaker, and that is Kelly Monahan. Please.
Hi. I had some prepared remarks, but we've heard some powerful witness from many people here, and my remarks seem a bit irrelevant at this point. I'm Kelly Monahan. I've lived here for 4.5 years. Thank you for hosting this forum. I would like to begin by noting that we all live on indigenous land. They are buried beneath our feet where we walk. And every day that I'm in my garden, I thank the people who were here before me in this beautiful land, and I want to remember them every day. I'm here to stand with and pledge my support to my neighbors of color. I'm here to listen and learn and know about their experiences. Change is inevitable. So let's get out ahead of it. Let's establish a clear and decisive path forward for our community, which involves action. Our town online is known for its excellent schools, and it's really interesting to hear these experiences. I had heard about some of these experiences before, not firsthand though, and now that I'm here listening to these voices, I'm kind of outraged, frankly, and if our children of color are experiencing racial harassment or ridicule, then whatever the school is doing is inadequate, in my personal opinion, and it needs to be addressed. We have some work to do there. I want the students of color at our schools to not only be safe, but to feel safe and welcome and supported and nurtured. There's no way we can raise a community without addressing the difficulties that these young people are facing. That is unscripted. My daughter, my 25-year-old daughter, is a transgender person. She lives in Olympia, Washington. I'll never forget the look on her face when we were sitting at an outdoor cafe and someone walking by uttered a transphobic slur, and the way she slumped and the way she cast her eyes down, it just, as a mother, God, it hurts, you know, that it hurts to worry about the safety and well-being, the emotional well-being of your child because of the way they look. And as a mother, it's pretty terrifying to know that your child can be attacked, harmed, or even just emotionally slighted. Racism can be very subtle. These words were uttered under the breath, and the person moved away quickly. This is what abusers do. They keep it subtle so they can't get called out. I love my town. I love living here. I love my neighbors. I love the quiet and the peace, but underneath that quiet and peace, there's something else going on. And silence in the face of racial injustice is complicity with racial injustice. Denial of racial injustice is complicity with racial injustice. Indifference and inaction in response to racial injustice is complicity. And as a group, we've got a great start. I so appreciate the eloquence and the honesty of the speakers here today. You've really moved me, and I'm so appreciative of your expression and your experience. I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Willamette Falls in Oregon City. When we leave our meeting, we speak some words, and at the very end is the last thing we say in our services: let us leave this hour together, refreshed anew, ready to ignite action for justice in the wider world. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much. That was our last scheduled speaker. Tammy, do we have any new signups or anything? Or I'd ask the council if anyone else wants to speak, if we want to go overtime. I'd certainly understand if we can.
John, we had one request from a Kelly Cheney. I don't know if she is on, that came in late today.
I am on. I submitted at 11:54 because I'm a procrastinator. I'm always late for everything. But it was on time, but just barely.
Excellent. Let's hear from you.
And my name's Kelly Cheney. I've lived in Gladstone since 1973 with a few years off for college. I have a class of 86, like one of the former speakers. First, want to clarify why I'm speaking, because I really do think this should be centered around people of color, and I want to hear their stories. But now that everyone's had a chance to speak, I'm speaking because, to be clear, racism, it's a white people problem. To echo what Zora said, this is not a Black people problem. I'm white. This is my problem. And I would like to apologize to all the people of color on tonight, because this is happening in our town. And to be clear, again, Gladstone is a racist community. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. My niece is an incoming 6th grader this year. She's lived here all her life, and her mother is Black and her brother is Black. My brother, of course, is white. And when her mom moved here, she told me she works at the school. She told me how racist Gladstone was about 10 years ago. And I'm ashamed because I didn't believe her. It wasn't my experience. I was living in my privilege 10 years ago, and none of the soccer moms would talk to her, and I just did not believe the stories, but it's true. And I'm worried for my niece as she starts junior high in Gladstone next year. My daughter's at the high school, incoming junior. She hears the N-word every single day. She says, Mom, it's in the hallways, it's in the cafeteria, it's commonly used. If she hears it, if she's in the conversation, she says something, and I said, do you guys go tell anybody? And again, it echoes the same stories we heard from the other students. The administration doesn't do anything. Now, I realize sometimes discipline is private, and so they can't say what they did, but there's also stories I've heard about, this is what I was told. An example of a girl reporting some sexual harassment, she was told, well, you know, that's just how boys are. So that's the attitude that we need to change, because kids are speaking up, and now they've sort of given up. And I have heard from my daughter and her group of friends that they go to the teachers, and the teachers seem to be way more responsive than the administration. They say things in class, they try to address things in a general way the next day. I don't know if what the kids tell the teachers are reported to the administration or not, or if it would matter, but that's something that might happen. My daughter was part of the social media instances that the girls were talking about with graduation. She spoke out against the boys involved, and she was attacked, and she was called a snitch, and she was harassed. And as these things have happened, mostly high school years is when this started, and kids try to speak out when they see things or hear things, and all of the other kids swarm and attack. Or they do all group together and go after the child that said something with a racial slur. Then the parents get involved. So let's be clear, this is about the parents. We can make the change at the school, but you have business owners that are racist, neighbors that are racist, and teachers that are racist. And so the parents jump in and say, well, it was just a joke, and they're just kids, and it's excused. It's again, echoing what people said. I moved down to a new street in October and was really happy to get in this nice little cul-de-sac. And a month ago, put up a Black Lives Matter sign in my front yard. Within 10 hours, I was getting a knock on my door by the neighbors saying I was breaking the HOA rules and that no political signs were allowed, no signs were allowed. And I looked throughout the neighborhood at the 2020 graduation signs and the 4th of July signs that were up for weeks. Nobody said a word, but I was made to take down my BLM sign. I work for a law firm, so my sign may be back up shortly, let me say that. But not everyone in our town has that privilege of being white and working for a law firm. I thought about letting it go because I got to live next to these people. But the Black people in our community, the people of color, they can't let it go. They can't just take their sign down. They've got to wear it on their skin every day. So this does really, I think the school is the most damaging place, but we really have to look at our community. Again, coaches, businessmen, teachers. I know there's been prior lawsuits, civil lawsuits against the school and businesses in Gladstone, yet nothing changes. And I'm here to listen, and I'm here to learn, and I want everyone to just know that during this process, everyone's gonna make mistakes. If we're not making mistakes, we're not doing the right thing. We're not taking action if we're not making mistakes. I want to do better. I hope everyone listens and asks how they can do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Kelly, we have anybody else before we move to close? Okay. I just want to say a couple of things, myself from my experience, for the community leaders and all of you here. One, I was just reminded that I was asked by the board of directors of the Oregon chapter of the American Planning Association about 4 years ago to take the lead at answering the question, as the board put it, how do we attract diverse communities to our public input processes, which was kind of a, academic, dry way of asking an important question. And I really jumped into it. A lot of research, a lot of conversations with thought leaders and people I could rely on to give me good ideas and good advice. And we did 3 community forums, which were extremely well attended in Portland, Salem, and Beaverton. And, the biggest lesson that I learned from that is that if you are doing, say, a Parks Master Plan and you're going to have an open house and you want your people from diverse communities to attend that, and you're talking about, gee, how do we do it? Do we do flyers in Spanish or whatever, all those classic things? My answer is you are 3 or 4 years too late. Those foundations have to be laid now. The relationships have to be built now. The network of not only communication, but dignity, reciprocal dignity has to be built now, not when there's some urgent pressing matter. I encourage all the leaders to understand that and to realize that this conversation tonight is one of the most important foundations of getting this conversation, these long-term relationships built. The second thing I want to say is that I, as a political scientist, am keenly aware that one of the greatest threats to our democracy is cynicism. And cynicism comes when promises are made, lip service is given, good intents are laid out there, and nothing happens. I admonish all of you to not allow the creation of a sense of cynicism stemming from tonight, but really that meaningful changes, meaningful actions take place, and they are heartfelt by the entire community. I want to thank, on behalf of the council, because I believe they all probably feel as I do, I am deeply moved, more so than I ever expected, by the stories we heard tonight and how powerful they are. Again, the council will be convening to review this evening and have a conversation about next steps, what might be best done. I don't think that's necessarily scheduled yet, but it will be. This recording will be available of this entire session soon via the city website, and I hope you'll take the opportunity to share it with your friends and neighbors and family. With that, I'm going to, I think, just declare that we are closed. Madam Mayor, do you want to say anything in closing or officially close the meeting?
Nope, other than the meeting's adjourned at 7:08 p.m. Thank you, everybody.